Hello there. You caught me pouring some beer. It's another Sunday night of conservatism on tap. How you doing, Johnny? Good to see
Doing
you.
pretty good. I have already poured mine,
What you
which is
got there,
good.
buddy?
Something very, very special today. So this is from Old Busthead Brewery.
Oh,
Again,
really?
give me a local beer. It's a caramel macchiato stout. I want you to listen to this. A rich aroma of hints of vanilla and caramel sweetness add to a toasty blend of an oatmeal stout, locally roasted.
Man,
Pretty
God
nice.
bless the fall and God bless fall beer. It's my favorite. I can't top it there, but I can compete. I've got a Yingling Hershey's Porter right there. Can you see that? Like,
Yes.
and the funniest thing about this is that I don't think that they spent much time trying to mix the two. It's just it tastes like a Yingling, and someone just like threw some chocolate in it. Like
It's,
they're very
it's
distinct
accurate.
flavors. Like
What's
if
the
you
ABV
notice,
on it?
look on the bottle. Like it's got Yingling on the top, and then there's a line, and then there's Hershey's right below it. Right? It's
That's
not
actually the line where they actually put the chocolate and then the beer. That's actually how much
right.
the
Like
chocolate
they didn't actually
is.
mix it together. They're just like, you know what? Somebody was drinking Yingling one time, and they were like, "Hey, look, there's a Hershey's bar," and then they're like, "That's not bad. Like, what if we just put it together and save us some time?" Like, that's a great beer. Yeah,
That sounds
this is
awesome.
from
That's,
Richmond. Is that right?
what's that?
Your beer is
Oh
from
yeah,
Richmond. Is that what you said?
yep, that's right. And let's see, the ABV though, it's actually pretty good because the ABV is not too powerful.
Yep.
Like it used to be when I was in like my 20s, I could totally handle like, okay, give me like 3 beers, make them like 13% each. It's going to be an amazing night. Now it's like whenever I have one, I'm like, I'm done.
Yep.
I get halfway through and I'm like, okay, I've had the flavor. I'm good. So I go back to like 6.5%, and it's drinkable. It's something that I can actually finish and not feel bad about myself after it's done.
That's probably what this is. Like, it doesn't even say. I mean, it's Hershey's. What do you want? Like, we put chocolate in beer, okay? Like,
Maybe 4.5%. Yeah. That's good.
but man, I love like all the fall stuff. Like it's just especially this year. Like I'm so excited about it. Like football is going on. Alabama beat Tennessee, which I'm happy about. We've got
Of
like
course.
some nice thick beer. We took our kids to the pumpkin patch. It's about an hour north
Yeah.
of our house today. And they rode on the little like train. And then there was this big like, and I'll have to show pictures of it next week. But there was this, like the ball pit that kids like playing. It was like that, but with corn
Yeah.
seeds. They were just like throwing them at each other or whatever. So they had that. They had a bunch of goats there and horses and ponies that they could ride. And then you pick your pumpkin, and you could even pick a sunflower if you wanted. And it was just great, man. I mean, there
Yeah.
was like zero social distancing. We were sitting there looking at like the ball pit, and we were like, yeah, it's like, like
Kids
it's
are
not
neat,
exactly
right?
happening. But it was a good time. It was a really good time. And it's just nice to get back to normal. We went to church this morning, and we have one of our services that's like almost full, which is so exciting to see. Like people starting to come back. We have like our Sunday school classes, like that's starting to come back. And then it just seems like even as there's still a lot of cases out there, I know, but like most of society is like going back, with the occasional quarantine, and you hear about
Yeah.
stuff, and you still have to wear a mask a lot of times, but it's just nice to get back into some semblance of a routine. And I just kind of
Yeah,
realized
you're right.
habitual creature I am. I'm a creature of habit, and not having
Yeah.
that for the past like 8 months or whatever it's been has been difficult. So
Well, I mean, we also were just feeling like the kids need to be able to play outside. They need to be able to play with their friends and play with their neighbors. And right now, like it's funny because in the backyard, especially now that it's cooler and the kids can stay out there longer, like all the kids congregate to our house, to our neighbor's house because they have all the toys just out there for everyone to play with. And like on one level, we're just like, is that a good idea? Like that's just like it's not getting washed down. It's going to be really hard to like keep them all clean. At the same time, there's just a sense of like they need this, like they need the social interaction. And so while we try to limit things as much as possible,
yeah,
there is this feeling of let's get them like the flu shots that what they can get, the immunizations, and like they have to be able to go back to some semblance of normalcy
yeah.
in the fall. And so it's a risk, we know, but it's something that I think is like it's worth it. It's worth it.
One of the
Um,
hardest things for us, Johnny, has been like our kids are very young. You know, my daughter is 4 and my son is about to be 3, and we have been working very hard to like keep things normal, even though it hasn't been. Like my son was on quarantine. He doesn't know that, you know, he's 2,
Definitely.
right? He just thought he got a surprise. He got to spend time with mom. But you know, we've been working very hard to pretend like there was nothing out of the ordinary. Like, and that's what's crazy is you think about like 20 years from now, they're gonna like read about this stuff and be like, wait, when was
Yeah.
this? Like when I was 3, I don't remember this at all. Like everything was fine. Like I don't wait, we went through
Yeah.
a global pandemic. You know, like I was just thinking about that. We'll obviously remember it. You know, years and years from now, the rest of our lives will be like 2020. Oh yeah, that was a year from hell. You know, but it's like we've worked so hard to like keep our kids' spirits up and like keep them going. And I'm just glad that it's getting easier and easier to do that. Like, still not completely easy, but it's
Yeah.
nice
It's
that
not easy.
we're not
But like you
having to
said, like
like pretend it quite as much as we were before, you know?
right. There'll be a few things that I'll show them. Like Ellie drew a picture. I doubt she'll remember very much of the virus, like aside from what we talk about.
Right.
Hopefully. But she drew a picture and it was like, it actually was like a circle with like the dots, like representing the coronavirus,
Yeah.
and like there was just this big fist right next to the coronavirus. And I was like, what is that fist? She goes, that's God punching the virus. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, then I'll keep it. So I'm definitely going to keep that in her portfolio. So
You're
she's
gonna
like
bring to
18.
show that. Get like a screenshot. We'll show that next week.
I
Like,
will. Oh, it's crazy. It has a fist. It has like a foot stomping the virus. Like that's God's foot. That's God's fist. Like,
taking it
okay,
out. That's what we're
I
praying
get
for.
it.
I love it. That's awesome.
So
That's
she knows
awesome.
where the hope is coming from,
That's
but
awesome. So
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
like so many things are going back to normal, you know, and that's really exciting. And talking about COVID-19, that was like the big topic of the
Tell me
debate,
about it.
right? The second debate they just had. I want to get your thoughts on that. But before we do, one of the things we always look at is like with the election coming up and all that. I know a lot of people are already voting. Let's take a look at
Yeah.
these polls, man, because
Okay.
it's crazy how close it is. Like after this debate, and then we'll kind of like try to explain why that is. I'm bringing this up on the screen now, and you can kind of see this polling. So, you know, we've been doing this the past couple of weeks of looking at the Real Clear Politics polling
Mhm.
and just breaking this down for folks. Is you see there on the left is the battleground states that we've been watching, and then you see
Mm.
where Biden is at, and it's in bold if he's winning, and then you see where Trump is at, and it's in bold if he's winning. And by the way, those parentheses by the state is the number of electoral votes that they are worth. Um, and then you see the Real Clear Politics average. That's taking a whole bunch of polls and putting them together to get an average. And then you see where it was 4 years ago, right around the time that Clinton was running against Trump. And then you see how it actually turned out in 2016. So, of course, like we know that the polls don't always tell the full picture. And so you can see just a couple weeks out from election where the polls were at versus where Trump was at. So you look at like Wisconsin, right? Wisconsin was showing Hillary at 6.2. But then what actually happened was Trump won it just barely. And now you see this year, Biden actually has less of a lead than Clinton
Yeah.
did, right? So his is at
Mhm.
4.6. Look at Minnesota. It's the exact same. It's the exact
Right.
same, and Clinton barely won it. North Carolina, he's got less of a lead than Clinton did at this point.
Yep. Same in
Florida,
Pennsylvania.
yeah.
Yep.
So just going through these states, it's pretty amazing, like how close it is. There's a couple slight changes, which is Georgia actually has Biden barely leading, but again, that's within the margin of error. You can see Texas way down there has Trump
Yep.
a little bit behind where he was 4 years ago. Nevada, Biden's got a little bit more of a lead. Same thing with Arizona, and then Iowa is slightly leading towards Biden. So, anyway,
Mhm.
it's just pretty amazing to see where these polls are at as we go into the election, and a lot of people like starting to make up their mind already
Mhm.
and vote and stuff. So, let's talk about that debate first. So, did you get a chance to
Yeah.
see? What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah. I did watch the debate, and it was much more easily watchable than the first debate. As you know, the news is coming out on it, right. They weren't interrupting each other nearly as much. They were able to make coherent thoughts on their policy. You could definitely tell that Trump knew how to actually restrain himself. It, definitely lends credence to the fact that he's not just a bully by nature. It's more of a bully by act, where he knows what he's doing. He can restrain himself if he wants to, and let Biden, run on and talk about his own policies and things like that. So I thought the moderator was better, and Trump, to his credit, also congratulated the moderator on a job well done. Overall, I felt like we got a little bit more substance with it. I'm skeptical about how much it is going to affect the election in the sense that so many people have already voted, as you said before. So it's unclear to me exactly how the debate is going to swing the election when so many people have already voted before the debate even occurred.
Yeah.
So that's something to consider there. But overall, I think that Trump came out on top. I think that he came out as being a lot more optimistic. He had a very much like he does, a can-do attitude for America and for Americans.
Yep.
And I felt that Biden was more on the restraint side, more on the caution side, but almost in a timid sort of way, very much in an oppositional stance. And then, of course, as the debate ran on, we can talk about it soon, but as the debate ran on, I think that he started getting pretty tired, pretty haggard, started slurring a little bit more. He never had a Bidenism, I would call it. But he certainly got to the point where he was just, kind of slurring along. And I think that if it had gone on maybe 30 more minutes, we would have seen something else pop up.
It was like that part where he, wasn't listening or misheard Trump when he's talking about Abraham Lincoln and stuff. And
Trump got on that
moments. But, I went back, and I think we talked about this last time, I went back and I watched Biden when he debated Paul Ryan. I watched a little bit of when Biden and Sarah Palin. And it was like a different person, And I know that was years ago, but he was so much stronger back then. And he's just kind of like a shell of who he used to be now, right? Not quite.
Well, let's see.
Let alone making powerful points. He just didn't make many sound bites. Like his closing statement was pretty good, but short of that, which is rehearsed and practiced,
he actually answered the question, in the way that the moderator wanted him to answer.
Yeah.
And that's why it came off stronger when Trump didn't answer that way. But, he had so many things where I thought he shot himself in the foot. I was actually kind of pleased to see that Trump kind of put on that, that outsider hat back on when Biden, did his thing where he turns to the camera, and I think it was a question about China foreign policy, which we know he's going to be weaker on, Trump's going to be stronger on. And he tried to make it something personal for like he's in the kitchen with, your every American and talking about, you're sitting around the table and you're discussing these things and you're worried. And Trump was like, what are you talking about? We're talking about China. Don't act like you know these people. Or, so there were times like that where Trump was really just pressuring them, pushing it hard that you're not your every American. You're Biden. You've been around for 40 plus years in the White, or in Washington, D.C. Come on. Right. You're not going to fix this stuff. So he kept playing that card over and over. You didn't fix it before. Why are you going to fix it now? And that was, I think it was rough for Biden to answer. Biden even
where we left off, you were talking about Biden and how he was talking about he was trying to be in the room, but then at the same time, Trump was calling him on that because the question was China.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. I mean, basically that Trump wasn't going to let some things pass that he let Biden pass on before. He certainly wanted to, I think where he was strong was just playing that card often enough where he was saying that Biden's, you've been here for 40 plus years. You haven't fixed these issues that are obviously that need to be fixed. So what makes us think that you're going to fix them now? And I think he just kept playing that over and over and really getting on Biden's nerves. I thought that was pretty telling when Biden was, or when Trump was saying, how come you didn't get criminal reform passed? And Biden very frustratingly said, the Republicans had the Senate. And I think Trump wanted to hear that because he's like, yeah, you're going to have to talk to them. You're going to actually have to do what I did, which is try and be bipartisan every now and again. And I thought that those kind of things, he certainly pressured Biden to make an answer about fracking that Biden has had to backtrack on now and, show the tape. And he was like, I'll show it in just a couple of hours. I'll do that. So he was very lethal. And I wonder how much it has swung the swing states, how much Trump is turning out his own voter base, and motivating his own voter base for this. But I really thought that Trump came out on top on this, especially since Biden had to backtrack so often after the debates were over.
Yeah, I mean, I think Trump doesn't need much, as we saw in those polls, to tighten things up, right? He only needs a few points, and he's right there within the margin of error. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just enough to bring folks out. But it's not just the debates, right? Like Trump was just here. He was here where I live, like just maybe half an hour
Mm-hmm.
away in Pensacola, just to fire up the base and to get those people to come out. I mean, he's got people all over, that are traveling
Yeah.
and arguing on his behalf. We've talked before about how he's got a very aggressive campaign strategy with the signs and he's got like all the trucks and stuff that have set up shop and that are selling all his
Mm-hmm.
memorabilia and everything else. So it's not just the debates for him. So I think it's going to be very, very close in this election. And at the same time, I don't see anybody who's like really enthusiastic about Biden.
Yeah,
There's
there's that.
enthusiasm against Trump, but there's not particularly enthusiasm for either one, like Biden or Hillary.
Yeah. Tell me how you think that the Hunter Biden emails are going to affect Biden, in your opinion. Do you think that it's going to get a little more traction with its legitimacy amongst news networks, or they kind of constantly just play that off as not being verifiable?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly what they're going to do. I think they should have stayed on the Supreme Court. Like as long as
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about the Supreme Court, I think it's a win for Trump. Especially because neither Biden nor Harris can really deal with the whole like court packing thing. Like clearly they want that option, and that's
Yeah.
just when you talk about a return to normalcy, going back to more establishment type candidates. When you're talking about packing the Supreme Court, that's not normal at all, right? Like that's
Yeah.
very radical and aggressive. And so the fact that they want to answer that question and they're super shady about it, it's not like, yes, this is something we're considering. It's like, oh, I don't know, we don't really want to talk about this, right? Like because they
Mm-hmm.
do that, like it makes them look corrupt, which is not exactly hard to do, and it
Yeah.
reminds people why they voted for non-politician types, which is what Trump is. But ultimately, I think what's so interesting is to compare Trump in the first debate to the second one. And it's like a
Mm-hmm.
totally different person. He was like complimenting
Yeah.
the moderator. He was like, like obviously letting Biden speak and just, beating him on substance. And then he kind of struck at certain points when he was like, why don't you explain this? Why don't you explain this? Who built the cages, Joe? Who built the cages? Right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he knew exactly when to interrupt him. And it wasn't often, but it was for a reason. And it
Yes.
just shows that he has the ability to change based on feedback, which is so
Mm-hmm.
important in a leader, right? If he had been the exact same as he was before, I think it really would have turned off, maybe 1 or 2% of voters. But because
Mm-hmm.
he can change and he can show that, and he can be statesman-like. I mean, we think about him doing the State of the Union and stuff like that. He can change. He can accept feedback, and he can be different. I think that's really fascinating, and it can show people that there's more to him than just the way the left paints him. So anyway, let's look at
Yeah.
the question because I asked it for several of our followers, um, and I wanted to get their take. And I asked them. I said, I thought President Trump had a strong debate last night. Will it be enough to win him the election? So let's take a look. Well, you
All
found
right.
a drink over there. So
Yeah, I'm actually having a second one because it's actually that good.
enjoy it. I'm still working on my first here. Um, Eric says nope. He says, I'll admit he did better when he got muted, but there was no big revelation about what he needs 4 more years for, and Biden didn't go full senile. 50 million people have already voted, so 1/3 of people, I'm guessing, Biden goes from 10 nationally to like 9 or 8. Too little, too late. Or as Frank Luntz said last night, Trump may have won the battle, but he lost the war. So I
Yeah.
think we both kind of disagree with Eric here on this one. Is I really don't see Biden's lead being that strong. I mean, just looking at these polls, right? Like,
Agreed.
again, I'll bring it back up. You see how Biden is so close to where Hillary was at. In some cases, he's a little bit better. In some, he's a little bit worse. So I don't see him as up quite as much as they were saying. And then at the same time, the big revelation is, again, Trump has the ability to change based on feedback. I mean, that is something that
Yeah.
is a good reminder for voters on there. And like you said, that Biden still, when he's allowed to speak, it's not that convincing. It's just not. He's just not who he was, and he kind of
Yeah.
proved it. So
He
maybe that's
seems
not
very,
an
he seems
extrapolation.
very bought and paid for, and in the sense that like he's certainly advised, but you can just detect what he's rehearsed,
Yeah.
and that's unfortunate. So I mean, if you look at his response on China, it's extremely vague. It's just that
Right.
he would keep China in line, and like okay, like that's all you got right there, and that's unfortunate. But I would disagree in some ways about that Trump didn't lay out a vision for the next 4 years. He did tout off the economy as being his record.
Right.
And I think that
Back after COVID. Yeah.
he did portray the coronavirus in terms of like he had a few better responses to say, which was like, yeah, hey, don't compare our numbers to Russia, don't compare our numbers to India, don't compare our numbers to China, obviously, like compare our numbers with our allies and with the EU. And when you can look there, we are, pretty much where everybody else is at, if not a little bit better. So like, let's actually be real here for a second. Obviously it's bad. He knows it's bad. He got it and he beat it. And now he's on the other end of it. So I like, what you were talking about, that he has kind of, I wouldn't say turned over a new leaf. It could be that, his bullying is just a strategy, and then he can easily take on a different strategy. And it's very telling, with between him and Pence, all of a sudden you've got someone who actually has behaved fairly presidentially, along with a very solid vice president. You've got Biden, who had some pretty weak responses, had to backtrack on a lot of those responses, probably might have lost in some swing states when it comes to, ending fossil fuels on federal lands, and then probably, the subsidies, as well as a vice president who really did not portray herself as being very presidential. If something were to happen to the president, it's hard to kind of see her in the White House as, the president there. So as opposed to Pence. So, I mean, all that, does it make a huge difference? I do think that it is going to make certainly a significant difference in the polling as what we're seeing. It is in the realm of believability now that Trump could win this election, and it not be such a shocker as it was with Clinton. So yeah, that's overall it was good.
I see so much of similarities between Biden and his relation to the Democrats versus, say, Mitt Romney, who was running against Obama in 2012. Right? Is like, here was the guy who was meh, like in terms of the base, like he really didn't fire up the base. Like, would they have preferred him over Obama? Of course, but like, I remember sitting there in voting back in 2012, and like nobody was excited, like like nobody was excited. Like some people were kind of excited to vote for Obama again, like on the Democrat side, but they had already kind of gotten over the rush of the first black president, so it's just kind of like re-elect the first black president. It's not quite the same rush, but okay. And then like on the Mitt Romney side, no one was excited at all. And like people are legitimately excited about Trump, but I don't see anybody doing that for Biden. So I think it's similar. And then the same thing with Kamala Harris. Like so many people are not excited about her because of how many people she put in jail for nonviolent offenses and things like that. So
yeah, I mean the records have really come back to bite them. I know with Trump it's about the coronavirus, but with Harris it's her record as a prosecutor. With Biden, it's his crime bill record, which has come back to haunt him. And honestly, I don't think Trump ever brought that up in the first debate, unless I'm wrong, but he really hammered it home in the second one. And all of a sudden you've got Biden who's talking, and Biden might've been coached this, but he framed, the election as being like, me, Trump, our level of honor, our level of respectability and our integrity, so that you need to vote by that standard. And like, what you're seeing now, especially after that last debate, is that Biden is in no way a better man than Trump. His record is not.
The whole thing is, what would you have done differently with COVID-19, right? And no one really has a good answer for that, like because there was such confusion. Like the whole part of, I wish it had gone away in by Easter. Sure, like there's some comments that Trump made that were dumb, but in terms of actual action, like if he hadn't shut stuff down, which he did. You could hit him on that, but then they want to attack him because he did shut things down. When that Biden would have shut things down just the same, right? Like, there's so many, like the country overall has tried to make sense of this thing, like the rest of the world, and like there's just not enough there to say that Trump was AWOL or something like that, because he was very clear. He was saying what he thought, doing what the best that he could. And when people want to say, 200,000 people died because of you, like, really? Like, the same number probably would have died under a Democratic administration. So it's really hard to put that like that blame on him, especially when the whole world is dealing with this. And he's quick to say, hey, this came from China, not us. Let's look at a couple other comments. I'll go back to this second.
Good. Yeah.
From Roger, he said, it's very similar to what we're saying. I've often heard it's the economy stupid. Trump effectively framed COVID-19 and environmental policy as economic issues. I think this will help him on November 3rd. We agree, as we've talked about. In my
Right.
opinion, most people have already made up their minds, and it's now about turning out your base. Did Trump turn out the base with Hunter's laptop, the threat of rising taxes and increased regulations, the possibility of an economic downturn? I thought Trump's performance may have had the effect of dampening enthusiasm for Biden, but not necessarily arousing his own base. I think that's a fair, that's a fair take on. That's kind of what we've said, is that he's doing other work to try to rouse his base and all that. So,
Yeah, I think what he has a good record of,
yeah,
before, like I had said before, like, I was worried when, Trump was running in 2016 that is he actually going to do the things that he said he was going to do? Right. We have we never seen his record at all. He's certainly an outsider. So what is he going to do now? And now you have his record. I think where he's been weak, of course, is reforming healthcare and things like that. But he has put the justices on the Supreme Court as he wanted to do, as he said that he was going to do. He has been pretty strict on his foreign policy, like he wanted to be, on immigration. So like there are those things that he has carried forward that he will, and then a strong economy. So I still think he has laid out his 4-year vision by looking pre-COVID-19, pre-COVID-19
yeah. I mean,
America.
we've talked about it before. There's so many reasons why the economy did well under Trump. It's not just magic or jujitsu or the businessmen love and women love Donald Trump and that's why no, there were specific things that he did. He went to India, he went to Saudi Arabia, he went to Israel. He did things specifically in terms of economic deals that benefited the United States, right? He did all kinds of things that said, hey, I'm going to help protect Saudi oil, and in exchange, I want the Saudis to employ this many Americans. Same thing in India, same thing in Israel, same thing with Emirates, so many other countries. He did economic dealings that benefited that country and also benefited the United States. And so when you have all this economic activity going on, and he effectively used military troops and operations in order to protect some of these investments, the economy responded to that. So there's so many things that he did that led to that growth, and so there's a formula that's going on here of mutual investment and job sharing and that type of thing, and that's what he would do again. So it's not magic. It was very clear. The media just doesn't report it. I mean, I remember I did a video for our channel, and it talked about the Middle East, and Trump is literally holding up signs for the cameras of the billions of dollars that are coming to the United States in terms of jobs and infrastructure based upon his deal with Saudi Arabia. And media doesn't report it, but hey, if he has cheeseburgers and they want to talk about that, right? So, it's that type of thing. One more comment here, and then we'll start calling it a night. This is from Damien, who says, I find it so strange that there can be people who haven't decided which of these two they'll support. I can only imagine that the number is quite small. I'm sure there are many who are deciding either to not vote at all or vote third party, but that someone hasn't decided if it's Trump or Biden, I just can't imagine it. In any case, I think Trump wins. What a shock to the system it will be for Democrats if it's not even close. And I think he kind of nails it with that comment. It's if you're trying to decide between Trump and Biden, you probably figured that out a long time ago. If you're trying to decide whether to vote or not, that could be, that could be it. Because people don't vote because it's raining, or they don't vote because, they forgot to get groceries, right? So it's is it in your mind on November 4th? That's the question. That's the question. And then, as he said, he thinks that Trump wins. And I think it will be a shock to the system. I mean, again, you look at it was a shock to the system going back to these polls when Trump beat Hillary. I mean, look at it. 4 years ago, Clinton was winning in Wisconsin. She lost, right? Clinton was winning in North Carolina. She lost. You can go through here. Pennsylvania, Michigan, so many of these states, Florida, she lost, right? So when we think about this, the same turn could happen. And then they really have to look at these polls because it's this whole system is not working for you guys, So it'll be interesting, how it turns out and if that really does shock the system further or if not. So I thought that was a pretty good comment by Damien.
No, I totally agree. I think that, it is hard to think about someone who hasn't made up their mind. I think certainly after this debate, if it was framed in the same way, if it was done the same way as the first debate, where there wasn't much going on, there wasn't much to really decipher, and nothing substantive, it might be a little bit easier to think about someone who's undecided. But I think after this debate, you certainly got a clear idea of the candidates. of what they stand for. It's not a surprise to us necessarily, but it certainly makes the divide extremely apparent. I certainly hope that it has motivated people to come out to vote. One of our commenters said that, yeah, I'm not sure if Trump motivated his base, but I can't help but think that Biden helped do what he probably did not want to do, which was clarify certain positions.
Yeah.
Obviously he didn't clarify anything about the filibuster, didn't clarify anything about packing the court. But when he started clarifying, some particulars about his position, which is very different than what he would say in the primaries, that's when things started, feeling troublesome for him. And that's where I think he's weak. And that's where I think that, that's where voters can actually decide, okay, do I really want to vote for Biden or not? Like all of a sudden I realize what he's for, or what he's against, or what he might do. Or now he seems very unpredictable, like he doesn't know what he wants to do very clearly. So, it's not something that you want to go for.
Ultimately, just thinking about this from like a political strategist type thing, it still astounds me that the Democrats went with who they did. It
I know.
astounds me that Biden chose Kamala Harris, who's very like establishment like.
Most liberal you can get almost.
Like,
I think,
listen, all of the Republicans think that you're socialist, right? Like,
yeah.
regardless of whether you try to play it as a centrist, regardless of if Biden would actually govern as a centrist, pretty much all the Republicans think of you as socialist at this point, right? Because they know that Bernie Sanders is going to be part of your administration, AOC,
Mhm.
Green New Deal. Like, as a Democrat, and which I'm not, but if I was, I would say like you might as well put AOC on your ticket. Like you might as well have had like Bernie Sanders as your running mate, because you might as well like go
Mhm.
socialist, because people already think that you are, right? So because that would at least fire up the base, right? The left base. And I think they're going to get punished for that. I think they're going to get punished for trying to play it centrist and cool, trying
Yep.
to be middle ground. Like there is no middle ground in politics anymore. There just isn't
Mhm.
much of one. And maybe there should be, but like pretending like there is, or pretending like you're going to get rewarded for being a moderate, like it's just
Mhm.
not going to turn out the enthusiasm vote today. That's not the world we live
Yeah.
in. And it was
Well,
the
that's been
same thing
like
with
one of the
Obama.
criticisms that we had even on our own channel, is that we're too moderate to be able to get any sort of traction or things like that. And we've contested that because obviously we're willing to say some of the hard things here. But that's where, you have Biden's campaign not being willing to say some of the hard things, or when they actually do come out and say something that seems fairly definitive, all of a sudden they don't want to actually swear by that.
Well, yeah,
Right?
it's
They
like
actually want to
you
say
have to
that, no, I didn't
be,
say that. I
if
didn't
you're
do
going to be a
that.
moderate like that, you have to be like an assertive one, like Benjamin Franklin.
You
Like
got to be
you
aggressive. You
have
have
to
to be
be
aggressive.
charismatic
Exactly.
and like articulate, and that's not what they have.
Not
That's
not
not what
using
they have.
false history in the vice presidential debate, to shame, your opponent.
They
Like,
don't have that. They really don't have that. Like you can have a moderating influence and it can be convincing, but it takes a very powerful, articulate person. And instead, they went with kind of a sleeper,
yeah.
in this in Biden, and then an establishment candidate in Harris. So if they pull it out, like I think it'll be kind of, frankly, a shock, because I see the enthusiasm. I mean, we're talking about Bennett being confirmed to the Supreme Court tomorrow, right? Like
Yep.
there's so many things happening that are reasons why people, probably will turn out for Trump. So pretty fascinating. He did mention third parties, and I always think that's interesting to talk about third parties, even
Yeah.
late, like at this point in the election, because there's like third party type candidates like, Rand Paul or on the Republican side, or Bernie Sanders. But it's like those people like drop off after the nominations, and then we don't really hear a lot from third parties. And I always thought it would be cool if there was like several third parties who could, contest it. So one of the guys who's trying, and he's just trying to set up a new political party, is Brian Carroll, who's running as part of a new party called the American Solidarity Party.
Nice.
And I'm looking forward to interviewing this guy. Yeah, we're going to talk to him later this week, probably on Tuesday, and we're going to
Okay.
release that. And I just think it's cool. People always ask me when we do this, like, is it because you support this person or not? And like, not really. Like, it's more just because I love the discussion, and I think it would be so cool if, like next election or the one afterward, you had a Republican, a Democrat, and a Libertarian, and then maybe this guy, something like that. I always think that like the diversity of thought is a good thing. So we're going to talk about that. I think that'll be
Yeah.
super fun. That's our next interview up. So
Yeah, well, I'd love to learn about, why they feel the need for a third party. What does the Democratic Party lack? What does the Republican Party lack? And, how do you justify the fact that you might be, quote unquote, stealing votes from either party that could
I'll
actually make
ask
a
him that.
difference? And
Yeah,
yeah, that'd be
I'll
great.
ask him
That'd
that.
be
So I think
great.
that'll be interesting. So we've got that, and then election night. I know we've talked about it. We're probably going to do a really long live episode just as votes come in. So for those of you guys watching live and that watch this video later, be sure to tune in on election night because we'll probably have about a 3 or 4 hour episode, and we'll just kind of be commenting as this all turns out. We've been doing episodes on this now for months, so I think it'll be kind of a relief to get the election over with. Hopefully, it's decided the night of. Might drag on if it's close, but either way, we'll do about 3 or 4 hours worth of live feed. Just me,
Looking forward to it.
you, John talking. We'll probably have Chris and Kyle on, so pretty much our full array of folks, and we'll be seeing it as it happens. So in the meantime, don't forget to check out our website at theburkingconservative.com. Check us out on YouTube at The Burking Conservative. Same for our Twitter. And then, of course, on Facebook, you can follow us there. Message us anytime. We'd be happy to talk to you. If you've got questions, comments, let us know. We'll put them on our episode, and then as you've seen tonight, we'll answer them. So I'm going to go finish off my beer, John. It was good to see you. Thanks for the episode, and happy voting, man.
Yeah, happy voting. Take care, y'all. Good night.